Ryan's chest heaved as if it wanted to tear itself open. The glow from the cloth dimmed, pulsing like a heart, waiting, watching. And then, with a violent gasp, his lungs filled with air again, his body shook, sweat dripping down his temple, but he was alive. The silence after the pain was almost worse than the pain itself. The girl stared at him, her wide silver eyes filled with shock. She had expected him to fall and never rise. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she pulled her knees closer to her chest, hugging herself as though she could vanish inside the shadows. Ryan steadied himself on the wall, his breath ragged, his mind screaming with questions. What was that? He whispered, but his own voice sounded distant to his ears. The girl's answer was soft, like a prayer to no god. You were not supposed to touch it. Her hands trembled, fingers curling as if she still felt the cloth's weight even though it lay glowing on the floor. You were not supposed to be here at all, she added, her tone bitter, broken. Ryan's training screamed at him to leave, to report this and let the science teams deal with it. But the memory of the pain, the strange power that had moved through him, would not let go. He felt as though something had been left inside him, some invisible thread tying him to that cloth and to her. He looked around the ruined chamber, realizing how wrong it felt. This was not just wreckage, it was a tomb, a prison, and maybe a warning. The girl whispered again, "Your people should never have come to the ship." Her voice cracked, carrying both anger and fear. She pointed to the glowing cloth, her hands shaking violently. "That is not for you, not for humans," she said, her words sharp despite her weakness. Ryan narrowed his eyes, his curiosity fighting against his orders. "Then what is it for?" he asked, taking a careful step toward her. Her eyes followed him, cold now, distant, as though she had seen this moment play out many times before. "It was for us," she said, "for my people." Her tone softened and her head tilted slightly. "But we failed." Her words seemed to echo in the ruined chamber, mixing with the hum of broken machines. Ryan crouched near her, careful not to touch her. "Your people," he repeated, his voice low. "You're not extinct." The girl's lips curved into something that was not a smile. "I am the last," she said simply, and the weight of that truth pressed down on him. The silence after her words was louder than any sound. He glanced again at the glowing cloth. Symbols shifted faintly across it, lines bending and curling like rivers of fire. It looked less like fabric and more like a living map. He felt drawn to it again, though fear pulled at the edges of his mind. It was as if the cloth itself wanted him. The girl saw the look in his eyes and shook her head quickly. "No," she whispered. "Don't touch it again." Her voice was filled with desperation, but also something else, something close to pleading. Ryan hesitated, torn between fear and the hunger to know more. He had seen wonders before, but nothing that reached inside him the way this did. "Why does it react to me?" he asked, his tone sharp now. The girl closed her eyes, her voice dropping to almost nothing. "Because you carry what we lost." Ryan froze, her words cutting into him deeper than any blade. Before he could press her for more, the ship itself shuddered. The floor rattled, loose panels falling from the ceiling with a crash. Dust filled the air, and in the distance alarms whined weakly like dying animals. The girl's head snapped toward the sound, her face paling even further. "They found us," she whispered, her voice tight with dread. Ryan's stomach twisted. He didn't know who they were, but he knew enough to be afraid. The glow from the cloth flared brighter, as if answering the threat. Ryan reached for it without thinking, but the girl grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes burned into his, desperate and fierce. "If you take it, there will be no way back," she said, each word heavy with finality. The ship shook again, the walls groaning like an animal in pain. And in that broken moment, Ryan realized the forbidden encounter had only just begun. The ship groaned again, its metal bones crying out as if something outside was clawing at it. Ryan steadied himself, his hand still caught in the girl's grip. Her strength surprised him, far greater than her fragile form suggested. Her silver eyes glimmered in the flickering light, filled with both fear and warning. He wanted to demand answers, but the shaking of the wreck forced silence on them both. When the tremors calmed, she slowly released his wrist. Her hands dropped back into her lap, thin fingers curling as though she no longer trusted them. The cloth still pulsed on the floor, its glow weaker now but steady. Symbols shimmered faintly across its surface, fading and reappearing like breath in cold air. Ryan's eyes followed the shifting patterns, unable to look away. The girl's voice broke the silence, soft and hesitant. "My name. It was once longer, but I cannot carry it anymore, she whispered. Her words carried sorrow so old it seemed carved into her bones. Rian frowned, tilting his head. What do you mean? She touched her chest lightly, then the side of her head, as if searching for fragments of memory. Names are power, she said, her tone steady now. And power is dangerous here. Her eyes flickered toward the cloth, then back to him. You may call me Kale, she added finally, as though offering him a piece of herself was already too much. Rian repeated the name softly, tasting its weight. Kale. It felt sharp and delicate, like broken glass in his mouth. The cloth pulsed at the sound of her name, its glow sharpening for a heartbeat. Rian noticed it and raised an eyebrow. It reacts to you too, he said. Kale shook her head slowly. No, it remembers me, but it does not answer me anymore. Her tone was heavy with grief, and her hands tightened into fists on her knees. It only answers to you now, she said, the words carrying bitterness like a blade. Rian's pulse quickened at her statement. What do you mean it only answers to me? He asked sharply. Kale looked away, her eyes tracing the cracked ceiling. Because you are human, she said simply. And because long ago, my people made a choice. Her voice trembled, and for the first time Rian thought he heard shame in her tone. The silence pressed between them again, thick and suffocating. Outside, something scraped against the hull, the sound distant but growing. Ryan's training screamed at him to call for backup, but some instinct told him to wait. Instead, he crouched lower, his eyes level with Kale's. What choice? He asked, his voice low and demanding. Kale's lips parted, but no sound came. Her throat worked as if she wanted to speak, but the words themselves fought against her. She raised a trembling hand and pointed toward the cloth. The choice is written there, she whispered, but the cloth does not speak in your words. Rian frowned, his gaze locking once again on the glowing symbols. The corridor was silent, except for the soft sound of boots pressing against broken metal. The human explorer, Captain Ryan, moved slowly through the wreck of the alien ship. The air was heavy, mixed with smoke and dust, carrying the strange smell of burned circuits. His flashlight cut through the dark, showing twisted walls and doors that had been forced open. He felt the weight of silence pressing on his chest, like the ship itself was holding its breath. Ryan had seen many wrecks before, but this one was different. There was something alive here, something hidden. His orders were simple: search, record, and leave. But when he heard a soft sound, like a whisper carried by the wind, his steps froze. The whisper came again, weak, trembling, almost human. He followed the sound through a doorway half buried in debris. His light swept across the room, landing on a small figure sitting against the wall. It was a girl, or at least she looked like one. Her skin had a faint glow, pale silver under the light. Her eyes were wide, too wide, staring at him as if she had been waiting. Ryan's heart raced, but he raised his hands slowly to show he meant no harm. The girl's lips moved, and the whisper came clear this time. I'm not clean, she said, her voice shaking like glass ready to break. Her fingers clutched a folded cloth against her chest, tight as if it was her last defense. Her whole body trembled, but she did not look away from him. Rian took a careful step closer, but the girl pressed her back against the wall. Her grip on the cloth tightened, knuckles white. The cloth was dark, stained, old, but something about it shone faintly, like hidden light trapped inside. Rian felt his throat go dry. He whispered, "What do you mean?" But she only shook her head. For a moment there was only silence between them. The ship groaned around them, the sound of distant metal tearing. The girl lowered her head, her hair falling over her face. Then, with a slow and painful motion, she loosened her hands. The cloth slipped, falling down onto the floor. Ryan's eyes locked on it. Symbols appeared across its surface, glowing lines spreading like fire under skin. They pulsed, alive, as if the cloth was breathing. Ryan's chest tightened, his heart beating harder than ever before. The glow filled the room, painting the walls with strange light. The girl whispered again, almost too soft to hear. "It will change you," she said. Her words were heavy, carrying fear and warning together. Rian tried to step back, but his body would not move. His hand shook, reaching toward the glowing symbols without his command. The light grew brighter, sharp enough to hurt his eyes. The sound of his own heartbeat filled his ears, louder and louder. He could feel every beat like a hammer inside his chest. The cloth seemed to answer, its glow rising in rhythm with his pulse. Then the pain hit him, sudden and sharp, cutting through his ribs. Ryan gasped, dropping to his knees, clutching his chest. The girl crawled forward, her eyes full of terror and sorrow. "You should not have come," she whispered, her voice breaking. The cloth lay between them, alive, waiting, and with each beat of his heart, the light grew stronger. Rian felt his breath falter, his vision blur. It was as if the ship itself leaned closer, listening to his struggle. The girl's hand hovered over the cloth, but she dared not touch it. Her eyes never left his face, watching, fearing, knowing what would come. And then, in the burning silence of the alien wreck, Captain Ryan's heart stopped. As he watched, the patterns shifted faster, forming arcs and spirals that almost resembled constellations. The lines bent and broke apart, then came together again like rivers finding their course. Rian's breath caught in his throat, because for a fleeting moment he thought he recognized a shape, a star system. His star system, the one humans called Sol. The cloth pulsed harder, its glow spreading until the walls of the chamber shone with ghostly light. Kale's voice shook. "It remembers the past, and it remembers your kind." Her face turned pale as the symbols flared around them. "You are tied to us in ways you do not understand," she whispered, her eyes filling with dread. Rian's chest tightened, his mind racing. If she spoke the truth, humanity's history was no longer its own. Before he could ask more, the sound outside grew sharper, like claws tearing metal. Kale's head snapped toward the door, her silver hair falling across her face. "They are close now," she said, panic creeping into her tone. Rian grabbed his communicator, but static screamed through it, cutting off any chance of contact. The ship itself seemed to conspire against him, silencing his call for help. Kale's eyes darted between him and the cloth, desperation in her stare. "If they find us, they will take it, and if they take it, everything ends," she whispered. Rian's fists clenched, his mind torn between duty and survival. He stared at the glowing cloth, then at the trembling alien girl who had given him her broken name. And in that moment, Captain Ryan realized he was holding a secret that could change the fate of two species forever. The silence after the scraping was heavier than any noise. Ryan stood frozen, sweat cooling on his skin as he strained to hear through the dead air. The wreck seemed to wait, its broken hulls holding their breath. Even Kale dared not move, her silver eyes locked on the dark doorway ahead. Only one sound remained, the steady pounding of Rian's heart inside his chest. At first, it was only in his ears, loud because of fear. But then the sound grew deeper, echoing beyond his body. Each thump seemed to spread outward, a vibration he could feel in his boots, in the walls, in the floor. The ship groaned again, but this time it was not from outside claws, it was answering him. The metal bulkhead shivered with each beat, as if the wreck itself had found a pulse. Rian staggered back, clutching his chest. "What's happening to me?" he gasped, his voice raw. Kale's gaze darted to the cloth, glowing brighter with each beat. Her lips trembled and her whisper cracked with dread. "It has chosen you," she said. "The signal has started." The cloth shimmered violently, its symbols racing faster and faster. They stretched off the fabric and bled into the walls, lines of light crawling across the metal like veins. The wreck came alive, humming with an energy too deep to belong to a dead ship. Ryan's breath hitched, his body trembling as the hum matched the rhythm of his own heart. Every pulse inside him sent another wave of light through the chamber. He staggered, nearly falling to his knees. The sensation was unbearable, a connection he had never asked for. The ship was inside him, and he was inside it. Kale reached for him, but pulled her hand back before she touched his skin. Her voice cracked. "You are linked now, and it cannot be broken." Rian's anger cut through the haze of fear. "Linked to what?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. Kale's eyes flickered away, as if ashamed. "Not just the ship," she whispered, "but to everything my people left behind." Her words filled him with both awe and terror. The chamber shook again, but not from outside. This time the vibration came from within, a heartbeat far larger than his own. Ryan froze as he realized the ship itself was echoing him perfectly. Each thump of his chest was repeated, magnified, shaking the air around them. The wreck was no longer silent, it was breathing with him. Kale's face was pale, her voice urgent. "If the hunters hear this, they will know where we are." Rian clenched his jaw, struggling to force the connection away. "Then make it stop," he growled, his fists trembling. Kale shook her head, her voice breaking. "I can't. Only you can." The cloth pulsed again and Rian felt something tug at the edges of his mind. Whispers filled his ears, faint but sharp, like words spoken underwater. He heard fragments of a language he did not know yet somehow understood. Carrier, chosen, return. the whispers called, repeating like a chant. Ryan slammed his fists into the wall, shouting to drown them out. Kale flinched, her silver hair falling across her face. "They are speaking to you," she whispered. "The echoes of the Elori still live, and they think you are one of them." Ryan shook his head violently, refusing to accept it. "I'm human," he growled. "I don't belong to them." But deep inside, he knew the whispers were already seeding into his bones. The scraping outside ended with a sudden, chilling silence. The wreck groaned once, then fell quiet as if waiting. Kale's face went pale, her breath uneven. "They are here," she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips, and in that moment Ryan understood. The echoes of the lost were not just in his blood, they were coming for him too. The silence after the scraping was heavier than any noise. Ryan stood frozen, sweat cooling on his skin as he strained to hear through the dead air. The wreck seemed to wait, its broken hulls holding their breath. Even Kale dared not move, her silver eyes locked on the dark doorway ahead. Only one sound remained, the steady pounding of Ryan's heart inside his chest. At first it was only in his ears, loud because of fear, but then the sound grew deeper, echoing beyond his body. Each thump seemed to spread outward, a vibration he could feel in his boots, in the walls, in the floor. The ship groaned again, but this time it was not from outside claws, it was answering him. The metal bulkhead shivered with each beat, as if the wreck itself had found a pulse. Ryan staggered back, clutching his chest. "What's happening to me?" he gasped, his voice raw. Kale's gaze darted to the cloth, glowing brighter with each beat. Her lips trembled, and her whisper cracked with dread. "It has chosen you," she said. "The signal has started." The cloth shimmered violently, its symbols racing faster and faster. They stretched off the fabric and bled into the walls, lines of light crawling across the metal like veins. The wreck came alive, humming with an energy too deep to belong to a dead ship. Ryan's breath hitched, his body trembling as the hum matched the rhythm of his own heart. Every pulse inside him sent another wave of light through the chamber. He staggered, nearly falling to his knees. The sensation was unbearable, a connection he had never asked. And for the ship was inside him, and he was inside it. Kale reached for him, but pulled her hand back before she touched his skin. Her voice cracked. "You are linked now, and it cannot be broken." Ryan's anger cut through the haze of fear. "Linked to what?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. Kale's eyes flickered away, as if ashamed. "Not just the ship," she whispered, "but to everything my people left behind." Her words filled him with both awe and terror. The chamber shook again, but not from outside. This time the vibration came from within, a heartbeat far larger than his own. Ryan froze as he realized the ship itself was echoing him perfectly. Each thump of his chest was repeated, magnified, shaking the air around them. The wreck was no longer silent, it was breathing with him. Kale's face was pale, her voice urgent. "If the hunters hear this, they will know where we are." Ryan clenched his jaw, struggling to force the connection away. "Then make it stop," he growled, his fists trembling. Kale shook her head, her voice breaking. "I can't. Only you can." The cloth pulsed again, and Ryan felt something tug at the edges of his mind. Whispers filled his ears, faint but sharp, like words spoken underwater. He heard fragments of a language he did not know yet somehow understood. "Carrier, chosen, return." The whispers called, repeating like a chant. Ryan slammed his fists into the wall, shouting to drown them out. Kale flinched, her silver hair falling across her face. "They are speaking to you," she whispered. "The echoes of the Elori still live, and they think you are one of them." Ryan shook his head violently, refusing to accept it. "I'm human," he growled. "I don't belong to them." But deep inside, he knew the whispers were already seeding into his bones. The walls of the wreck creaked again, as if the ship remembered voices that no longer lived inside it. Ryan stood frozen, his gaze trapped between Kale's trembling form and the glowing cloth on the floor. His heart still pounded from the vision of the star map, the unmistakable shape of Saul etched in living light. He wanted answers. He wanted to understand why a relic of an alien race would burn with the memory of his home. But Kale's eyes told him the truth would not be gentle. She drew her knees tighter, her face half hidden in the silver strands of her hair. "You see now," she whispered, her voice breaking. "The cloth remembers your world because it was once ours too." Ryan blinked, stunned, his breath catching in his chest. "That's not possible," he said, his words sharp with disbelief. "Your people, your race, are supposed to be gone. wiped out long before humans learned to walk in space. Kale looked up at him, her eyes glowing faintly with the reflection of the cloth's light. Gone, yes, but not erased, she said, her tone heavy with grief. My people were called the Elori, she continued, each word trembling as though speaking them carried pain. We built wonders, voices that sang across stars, but pride was our poison. Her lips quivered, her silver eyes glistening. We thought we could hold the galaxy in our hands. Rian felt the words settle deep in his chest, a mix of awe and unease twisting in his stomach. The cloth pulsed again, as if echoing Kale's confession, glowing brighter for a heartbeat, then dimming back. Pride destroyed us, she whispered, and in our last days, we feared extinction. Her gaze fell to the cloth, her voice almost too soft to hear. So we made a choice. We hid pieces of ourselves inside another race, one that would rise after us. Rian froze, his blood running cold. Her words pressed into him like a blade, sharp and merciless. You're saying, he stammered, that humans carry something of the Elori. Kale nodded slowly, sadness thick in her expression. Yes, your kind are not just the children of Earth. You are also the children of us. The chamber seemed to grow colder, the shadows stretching longer around them. Ryan's throat went dry, the weight of her words shaking the foundation of everything he believed. Humans had always thought themselves pioneers, the first of their kind to climb into the stars. But if what she said was true, they were not pioneers. They were inheritors, and the inheritance came from a race that had destroyed itself. Kale's eyes narrowed, her voice hardening. The cloth was never meant to find you, she said. It was meant to test you, to see if the echoes of us still lived in you. Rian's fists tightened, anger mixing with fear. You should have told us, he snapped. You should have warned us. Kale shook her head, sorrow spilling from her tone. Would you have listened? Outside, the scraping grew louder, a low growl of metal tearing metal. The ship vibrated under the assault, dust raining down from the ceiling. Kale flinched at the sound, her hand pressed against the wall as if she could feel the danger crawling closer. They hunt what is left of me, she whispered. They have hunted for centuries. Her words carried a weight that made Rian's stomach twist. Who are they? He demanded, his voice rising with the vibration of the wreck. Kale's lips pressed into a thin line, her silence answering with fear instead of names. The cloth pulsed brighter, symbols racing faster across its surface. It seemed to warn them, or perhaps call out to something unseen. Rian stepped closer, his hand hovering above it, torn between fear and need. Kale's eyes widened, her voice cutting sharp through the roar of the ship. Do not touch it again, she cried, her body trembling. If you awaken it fully, you will not be able to return to what you were. Her words struck him with the force of truth. He pulled his hand back, but the hunger inside him remained. Ryan clenched his jaw, forcing the fear down. He was a soldier, trained to fight, but this was no battlefield he knew. His enemy was inside him as much as it was outside the wreck. He stared at Kale, then at the cloth still glowing faintly on the ground. A terrible realization formed in his mind. It was not just a relic, it was a key, and it was already unlocking him. The ship groaned louder, the light pulsing faster in rhythm with his heart. Kale reached out, her voice sharp, urgent, almost breaking. You must decide, she cried. Fight it now or let it in, because once the hunters breach this place, the choice will not be yours anymore. Ryan's pulse thundered in his chest, the whispers burning brighter in his skull, and as the walls shook around him, he knew the truth under his skin was rising whether he wanted it or not. The walls shook with a final shriek of tearing metal. A section of the wreck's hull caved inward, sparks bursting in a shower of dying light. Through the smoke and debris, shadows poured in, tall and sharp, their movements too fast to belong to humans. Rian's breath caught in his throat, his hand reaching instinctively for his sidearm. Kale grabbed his wrist before he could draw it, her voice a trembling whisper. Bullets will not stop them. The first hunter stepped through the breach, its form tall and bent, its armor glistening like insect shell. Its eyes glowed faint red, sweeping across the chamber as though it could smell the fear inside. Another followed, then another, until the doorway was filled with looming silhouettes. Their claws scraped against the walls, leaving deep scars in the metal. Each sound of talon against steel made the chamber vibrate like a warning drum. Rian felt the cloth pulse harder on the floor, its glow brightening in rhythm with his racing heart. The hunters froze at the sight of it, their heads tilting in unison, as though pulled by one mind. A low hiss filled the chamber, not words, but hunger. Kale's fingers dug into Rian's arm, her silver eyes wide with terror. "They came for the cloth," she whispered, "and now they smell it in you." The lead hunter lunged forward, faster than Rian could blink. He barely pulled Kale to the side as the clawed arm struck the wall, metal shrieking under the force. Sparks rained down, the air filling with the sharp tang of ozone. Rian pulled Kale to her feet, his voice sharp and desperate. "Move!" Together they sprinted into the shadowed corridor beyond, the wreck trembling with every step. The hunters followed, their claws scraping, their bodies moving with a terrible grace. The echo of their pursuit filled the halls like rolling thunder. Ryan's boots pounded against the deck. Kyle's breath quick beat. Behind him, the cloth, still glowing, floated just above the floor as if carried by invisible hands, keeping pace with them. Each pulse from it sent a shock through Rian's chest, urging him forward. They turned a corner, the corridor collapsing ahead with twisted beams and jagged steel. Ryan skidded to a stop, his eyes darting for another path. Kale pointed to a narrow maintenance shaft half hidden behind fallen debris. "It leads to the lower levels," she cried. "Go!" Ryan shoved aside the rubble, dragging her through the narrow gap as the hunters closed in. Inside the shaft, darkness swallowed them. The only light came from the cloth, its glow painting their faces in ghostly silver. The hum of the wreck followed them, still bound to Ryan's heartbeat. Behind them, claws scraped against metal, the hunters forcing their way into the narrow space. The shaft became a tunnel of echoing terror, every sound magnified, every breath a scream in the silence. Ryan pushed forward, his body scraping against jagged steel, his lungs burning with every gasp. Kale crawled ahead of him, her silver hair glinting in the cloth's light. He could see the fear in her shoulders, the way they trembled with each desperate move. The whispers in his head grew louder, no longer faint but sharp, commanding, "Fight! Awaken! Claim!" the voices demanded. Rian shook his head, teeth clenched. "Not now," he muttered, forcing the voices back. The shaft opened suddenly into a wider chamber, the floor littered with broken panels and shattered glass. They scrambled out, pulling themselves to their feet. Kale pointed toward a hatch at the far end, her voice ragged. "That way, before they—" Her words cut off as a clawed hand burst through the shaft behind them, tearing it wider. The hunters poured into the chamber, their red eyes burning in the glow of the cloth. Ryan pulled Kale behind him, his pistol raised. And though he knew it would not matter, the cloth lifted suddenly, rising into the air between them and the hunter. Ryan's pulse thundered, the wreck shaking with his heartbeat, but the hunters did not retreat, not fully. They regrouped, circling the chamber with patient hunger. Ryan knew this was no victory. It was only a pause. He turned to Kale, his voice grim. "We run, or we die here." And with the hunters pressing in from every side, the chase tore on through the bleeding heart of the ship.